Okay, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, dear sisters. Just want to make sure that everyone can hear me clearly. If you can just let us know in the chat box, please. Okay, great. Fantastic. Excellent. Jazakallah khair. So, a very warm welcome to everyone. Welcome to the Solace webinar on the lasting powers of attorney. I'm very, very excited about tonight's webinar. It is a much needed topic that all Muslims need to be aware of, mashallah. But particularly for us as Revert women. And I hope that by the end of tonight's webinar, you will have gained an understanding about LPAs, as well as I hope that it will create a sense of urgency in ensuring that you are protected should qadarullah wa ma sha'a fa'al, something happen to you in the future. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant all of us the very, very best of health. Ameen. So my name is Alia Quadri, and I am the founder and CEO of Solace. And I also have my co-host tonight, Sister Yasmin Hock, who is an attorney, a solicitor, and a legal expert, mashallah. And very, very excited about the information that she's going to be sharing with you. I think it's going to be very informative. And I really do believe that by the end of the webinar, you will feel like this is a much needed service, and a service that will protect you, bi'idhnillah, by Allah's permission. Okay. So I've introduced us both, alhamdulillah. So what can you expect from tonight's webinars? Well, we're going to look at what LPAs are. Just out of curiosity, those of you who are joining us live, have you heard of a lasting power of attorney before? If you can just let me know in the chat box. Have you heard of a lasting power of attorney? So I can see someone has said never, no, a couple of yeses. Okay. Well, I think Yasmin, correct me if I'm wrong, they're really going to understand what this is and why it's so very important. For Muslims in general, but particularly for certain members of the Ummah, certain kind of vulnerable communities within the Ummah, and obviously Revert women are one of them. We're going to look at some case studies which you may resonate with, you may not resonate with, but it's to highlight the importance of having an LPA established by law in your life. We're also going to look at how you can put that in place and what your options are, inshallah. And then we're going to introduce the actual support service that Solace has created in partnership with Sister Yasmin Hock and her practice, mashallah, and how you can access that service at the end. So this is what to expect over the next 30 to 45 minutes, inshallah. Okay, so I would like to hand over to Sister Yasmin, who will take you through this very, very important and much needed service, inshallah. Jazakallah khair.
Okay, thank you, Sister. And Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's a real honor and pleasure to be here and speak to you about this service, alhamdulillah. As we saw with the replies, there's yes and no, so a mixture out there. And where I worked for 10 years in practice with established law firms, what we found is that people would come where they didn't have lasting powers of attorney. So we were dealing with cases to resolve when this was not in place. So I feel very privileged and bless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has been able to grant me this opportunity that I can share with my sisters here the importance of this early planning and how to do it. So what are lasting powers of attorney? many people are familiar with Islamic wills and will writing, and especially the hadiths and instructions about not letting 2 nights pass without having your will written. And there are legal procedures to follow, which vary depending on what jurisdiction you're in to get that document in place. It's different for England and Wales compared to if you're based in Scotland and also Northern Ireland. And those slight differences are because of the law of the land that you have to follow to make sure that the will is legally binding in the practice country that you're in. If we go to the next slide, what we should recognize about will writing is that a legally binding will, once you've completed it and it's done, alhamdulillah, it actually only comes into effect, if you think about it, when the person passes away. So if it's your will and you're the testator, everything that you've written in there in terms of your wishes, what should happen to your assets and your instructions for the loved ones takes effect upon death. And during the lifetime that you have, alhamdulillah, you can amend that as many times as you want, provided that you do it in a legal way, replacing the old will, revoking it in full, and then preparing a new document, as long as you have the mental capacity to do so. So what we're talking about when we come to lasting powers of attorney is a document that is implemented in your lifetime. So should something happen and you lose capacity, and we'll go on to talk about how that could happen and why it might happen, if you have a lasting power of attorney document legally binding and registered in place, it protects you for your lifetime decisions that can occur. And it's to do with your loved ones, it's to do with your own body, your health, and also all of your financial matters. In this regard, the lasting powers of attorney are regarded as more important than the will itself. And you can research this as well by looking up, what is the importance of a lasting power of attorney? And there's lots and lots of content to explain why it is actually more important than will writing, and why hopefully our webinar today will go through how to put that in place. So during the lifetime, it's one component of what you would refer to as estate planning. So Muslims should absolutely have lasting powers of attorney in place to ensure all of your lifetime decisions to do with your health, your welfare, your property, and your financial matters can be completed in accordance with your faith, especially if you're living in a non-Muslim majority community or country, because there are important decisions that may need to be made during your life before death occurs, which have to be done in accordance with your faith. And these documents can help that happen. So lasting powers of attorney, abbreviated to LPAs, once they are legally valid and they've been registered properly, they provide you with the lifetime protection for those decisions about your health. And that could be if you're liaising with a hospital or with medical practitioners, even with your family members needing to know something that needs to be done for your health and well-being. And when it comes to property and financial matters, this is to do with banks, mortgage companies, even if you are renting with the landlords, any organization that is in charge of assets taxation, these documents can be used with those organizations. So when we're referring to mental capacity, this is what you need to have in tact. So you've got the ability to make decisions for yourself. When that is okay and that's happening, of course, you go ahead and you access your bank account, you make decisions about what medication to have. That's your freedom and right to do so. Mental capacity, however, is a medical definition which can be lost due to illnesses or diseases such as strokes, brain injury, dementia, or Alzheimer's. However, you might think, okay, well, this is something that happens when I have a disease, illness, or I'm elderly, but it can also be a temporary circumstance, such as COVID-19, making you unable to interact with the outside world, falling into a sudden or temporary coma, or having an unexpected accident that means you are in a recovery mode and perhaps you've got some kind of ill health, which means you haven't completely got a diagnosis of loss of mental capacity, but the doctors are indicating that there's some memory loss occurring or some potential loss that could get worse over time. So there's already a hint of an incapacity diagnosis. Once that actually happens, so a doctor or a medical practitioner implies or suggests mental capacity is gone, or it's been impacted, at that point in time, it could be too late and it might not be possible to go ahead to complete this application to make a lasting power of attorney. The person has to be able to give full instructions and have the physical ability as well to sign documents. What's important to note here, though, is sometimes there have been occasions in practice where someone's broken an arm or they are unable to physically sign. But as long as they have the mental capacity, that's not a barrier to completing your lasting power of attorney. So the focus is very much on that mental capacity to give your informed consent at the time of making the application. So I've mentioned briefly that there are two main types, and this is because the Law of England and Wales divides the decision-making process into two different categories. The first type of lasting power of attorney application which you can make is for your health and welfare decisions. And these documents will include information about what should happen in a situation that you are you're wanting a lasting power of attorney for decisions about your treatment or the continuation of treatment. So actually, it's a good opportunity to talk about this with family members about preferences to do with organ donation, life-sustaining treatment, important things which, when you're in a vulnerable situation, your capacity may be impacted and the decision making as well is not as strong. However, at the time of applying, this is when you have a clear mind, you have capacity, and you can really think it through. What would I like my family members to do in that situation, and set it out in that health and welfare one. The second type is the property and financial affairs, and this deals with everything external to your bodily well-being. So it's your business if you have one, it's your bank accounts, whether they have a little in them or a lot, they need to be dealt with an informed decision as well. If you own property, if you're renting, anything to do with financial matters is covered by that second document called the Property and Financial Affairs LPA. So why is it essential and compulsory specifically for Muslims to have all types of lasting powers of attorney in place? Well, there is a direct duty and obligation specified for us to take responsibility for those who become vulnerable or incompetent in any way. There's also emphasis on being just and fair when trusted with such a responsibility. And all of these alhamdulillah, subhanallah, are Islamic principles in harmony already with the prescribed laws around lasting powers of attorney, because the law has been in place, I think, from the 70s, 80s, and it develops. And there's also laws going through currently to include additional conditions about fraud and abuse. So the law of the land is always evolving to do with this category, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already shared this concept of trust and responsibility for us within the verse of Surah Baqarah, chapter 2, Surah Baqarah, specifically in verse 282, where it says that we are instructed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that if the debtor, so anybody who owes something to anybody, is feeble-minded or weak or cannot dictate for himself, then his guardian should dictate with fairness. So, subhanAllah, this is really insightful for me as a lawyer and a legal expert when I look at that expression that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given that guidance to all of mankind to take that duty up. So, we know we have this huge responsibility to look after the vulnerable. But the problem, I guess, for us to know as Muslims is that in the law of the land, unless you specify that you want to be an attorney for that individual, you are completely restricted from acting as the guardian, taking that responsibility and fulfilling that Islamic role because you haven't put the lasting power of attorney in place. So you're automatically hampered from taking that first good duty and step. So the leads to the next point here about without the legally valid and registered LPA, no person has the ability to make a decision on behalf of another when mental capacity is temporarily or permanently lost. Instead, it is actually the relevant authorities, whether it's the local authority, social services, banks, building society, they all have a huge amount of laws and regulations in place that they can automatically action because they don't need to go to court to get these laws. These laws are already there for those organizations. So it is very much harder to challenge that because they are acting within the law of the land when they initiate action to seize assets, to freeze accounts, to block treatment happening, or to insist certain type of decisions are made, because they, of course, are following the law. And the organizations will make decisions to protect that person's interests in accordance with safeguarding rules or fraud rules, and to protect the asset and the person according to the law of the land. When an alternative decision is desired by the individual, so if you're saying, okay, for mum and dad or for myself, actually, I would have preferred this decision instead, you then need to make a lengthy and expensive court application to obtain an order in order to resolve that dispute. And that could take many months, and that can be very stressful and difficult to do without legal input at that time. However, with the legal lasting power of attorney validly in place, you are on a level and equal playing field with those organizations. So instead of saying that, well, you are going against my wishes or against my choices, you'd be able to say, excuse me, I am the legally appointed attorney for this person, and this is the decision that we will be making. And as Muslim believers, we will be following the Islamic principle of acting in the best interests of that person anyway. So it provides us with the protection from other organizations insisting on following laws which may be not in the best interests of a Muslim believer wanting to fulfill their health, welfare, property, and financial decisions. So at this point, we will highlight some case studies, and Sister Alia will run through some of these more in detail with you all.
Thank you very much, Yasmin. So we have a number of case studies to present to you. As I said right at the beginning, some of them may resonate, some may not, but I think it's very, very important to cover a wide range of different scenarios that could happen. and how having an LPA can protect you in those circumstances, just to highlight the importance of this. So the first case study is the businesswoman. So Sarah is aged 33. She ran her own business, and Sarah then had a car accident, leaving her in a coma. She's no longer able to manage her own affairs, and her family needed access to Sarah's business and private accounts in order to keep the business running, in order to keep her business running. They were unable to do so, as Sarah had not made a property and financial affairs LPA. Her family therefore had no ability to access these accounts or run her business for her. So I really want you to imagine this. Thankfully, Sarah made a recovery and regained mental capacity within a relatively short time. But had she not done so, then her business would probably have not survived. She would probably have found herself in financial ruin. If Sarah hadn't regained capacity in a short time period, then one of her relatives would have had no alternative but to apply to the Court of Protection for a deputyship order, which is very expensive and very long, to enable them to deal with Sarah's business and personal finances. Let's move on to the second case study. So, sorry, just to mention one more thing in regards to the previous case study, apologies. So an application of this type often takes 6 to 8 months to complete. Is that correct, Yasmin? 6 to 8 months to complete. So during this time, no one else would have been legally permitted to run the business, pay employees, deal with contracts or correspondence, resulting most likely in the business failing, with catastrophic consequences for Sarah, her family, and any employees. So what would have been the alternative, Yasmin, had she, let's say that she, very sadly remained in a position where she didn't have the capacity to make her own decisions? What would have happened if she didn't have what would have happened if she did have an LPA in place?
Yeah, so with the lasting power of attorney, she has the opportunity, knowing specifically for her that she has a business. So when we are doing consultation with her, we will advise as to who would be the best attorney to appoint here. So who in your family do you trust and regard could take that responsibility on in the event of an emergency? And it's things we don't think about, but that's the point, that you would have a little think and come up with someone. It could even be your accountant. So with the property and financial affairs, if you're specifying it's just for my business and you think, okay, I've got a business advisor, it can be someone like that who knows how I'm running my business, but it can also be a trusted family member. And because they're the legal appointed attorney, they will have the obligation to at least pay the employees, ensure that debts are not incurring. They have this obligation known as like being a trustee to keep things going as best they can. So it's something you have to return to, inshallah. And if not, and God forbid, Allah forbid, your situation deteriorates, so your health is not getting better and you stay in this situation for a long time, at some point you may have to make the decision, okay, to close the business or to pass the business on to someone. The attorney can do that for you, and they have an obligation to do it in the best way possible, because if your capacity returns, then you can say, okay, I'll check the book, see it's been done properly, and then you can rectify it if you're not happy with anything. And then if the situation is so bad that you eventually pass away, that's when the LPA becomes null and void. And then we look at your will. So what did your will say about your business? Where's that going? So they kind of interlink at that point.
So in kind of simple layman's terms, the LPA is almost like a will for when you're alive.
Pretty much, more or less, in a simple way. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, let's have a look at the second case study. So this is an elderly married couple. Aisha is a revert to Islam and lives at home with her husband, Omar. They have one adult daughter, Sophia, to whom they are very close. Aisha had always wanted to live in her own home with her husband for as long as possible. After Aisha suffered a sudden, unexpected illness, it was considered that Aisha was no longer mentally capable of deciding whether she should remain in her own home or go into a care home. Aisha had not made a health and welfare LPA, and as a result, social services decided that Aisha should go into a care home rather than remain in her own home with a support package in place. Subhanallah. So towards the end of her life, when she's vulnerable, rather than have her own wishes honored, or even those of her family, Yasmin, we now have a system who obviously has no emotional regard for her welfare, decide where she should remain in her final days. This is quite quite alarming when you really think about it, that a group of people get to decide where she remains in her final years. Subhanallah. So social services decide that Aisha should go into a care home rather than remain in her own home with a support package in place. If Aisha had made a health and welfare LPA while she was mentally capable, appointing her Muslim family, her husband and daughter to be her attorneys, then they, rather than social services, would have had the power to take the decision as to whether it was in Aisha's best interests to stay in her own home or not. And I think that's absolutely their right. Absolutely their right. Without the health and welfare LPA, the husband and daughter had no legal entitlement to make that decision. And that's really what is shocking, that you automatically think, without, a legal background, without, legal knowledge, you automatically think, well, this is my husband, or this is my wife. They will be able to say what is best for me. They will be able to make decisions should I be unable. But legally, that isn't the case. And that's why this is so important, right? Right, Yasmin?
Yeah, it's really sad. I mean, because I've dealt with so many cases in practice where there hasn't been the lasting power of attorney, and there's that real shock and horror realization of the power of the other organizations. And it's really heartbreaking because your hands are tied at that point because the organization is following rules. No matter how harsh it can seem, they will have reports, evidence, documents to support that decision that they're making. And it's a real uphill battle at a time where you haven't got energy resources and you just want to be with your loved ones and you can do it, but you then have to prove it, and so that takes I would prefer the community to be empowered, have these documents in place. I'm the attorney, you know that's how it should be, but we just don't get that information, and I know that it's really important to have that in place. And so you just don't know if you'll need it or not, but the point is it's too critical to not have at the time. It's already too late, if that makes sense. So
Yeah,
yeah.
thank you. Okay, let's have a look at another case study. So Farhan had an unexpected and sudden illness, resulting in him permanently losing mental capacity to deal with his property and financial affairs. Farhan was forced to move into a care home on a permanent basis. Farhan and his wife Fatima jointly owned their home. Prior to his illness, Farhan and Fatima had been planning to sell their home and move to a smaller, more manageable home nearer to their children. Neither Farhan nor Fatima had made LPAs. As Farhan no longer had mental capacity to sign the legal paperwork to enable the sale and purchase to proceed, two applications to the Court of Protection had to be made. Firstly, to enable the sale and purchase to proceed, and secondly, to have both Fatima's and Farhan's children appointed as his deputies. These court applications took many months, and with court fees, medical report fees, etc., the costs were very, very expensive. In the meantime, pending the court orders being made, Fatima could not proceed with her move. And what with the sudden deterioration in her husband's health and the various legal hoops to be jumped through, this understandably caused her considerable stress and had an impact on her health. Had Farhan made a property and financial affairs LPA whilst he was mentally capable, there would have been no need to apply to the court at all, and Farhan's attorneys could have signed all the legal paperwork for the sale and purchase, enabling Fatima to move when she and Farhan had originally intended, and without all the additional expense and delay. Fatima has now made both a property and financial affairs LPA and a health and welfare LPA, as the last thing she wants is for these problems to arise again should her health decline in the future. Let's go to the next case study. So we have a mother. Mariam was a revert who suffered complications following heart surgery. She had two daughters, Yasmin and Nouri. Whilst Yasmin was eager for her mother to receive every available treatment, Nouri was not. The hospital decided that it was in her best interests to treat Mariam. However, while she survived the treatment, her quality of life was greatly diminished and her health was very poor. Yasmin and Nouri are no longer talking, and Mariam is upset as, given the choice, she would not have had the treatment. If Mariam had made a health and welfare LPA, this situation could have been avoided as her wishes would have been legally followed. So these are some case studies which highlight the importance of having both LPAs in place. I'll hand back to Yasmin, who will talk to you about how you can actually put this in place in your life, inshallah. Jazakallah khair.
Okay, thank you, sister. Yes, so going to the practicalities of how do we get this in place then, now that we know it's really important to do so. So the first easiest route, if you like, is just to go to the government website or to Google lasting powers of attorney, and all of the forms that are necessary and needed to complete this are available for members of the public to download and put this in place. So this is usually one of the fallback arguments of organizations like banks, social services, in reply to saying, well, I didn't know about this, or how could I have done it? The government has actually made these forms available for the public to go ahead and complete them with all of the required information, dates, signatures. There's an online procedure to go ahead and do this, or you can manually download the forms, fill in the donor will be yourself, the person who is going ahead with wanting the lasting power of attorney. The attorneys that you will choose, Islamically, you should choose someone who is of the Muslim faith, who understands your wishes, and you can choose different ones for health, welfare, property, and financial affairs as well. Sometimes if somebody does have a large business or asset portfolio and they prefer to have different financial attorneys for their personal bank accounts and day-to-day expenses in life, and another one for their commercial assets, it's possible to adapt the forms to specify an accountant or a financial advisor to deal with your assets in a halal Sharia compliant way. So all of those forms can be completed. You'll need a witness to complete the content as well. So they should be seeing the signature that you sign, and they should be someone who's independent, so not a family member. And ideally, if you select someone you've known for a longer time and who can genuinely, should the need arise, because the whole point of a witness is that somebody is questioning the validity of the lasting power of attorney, or somebody is saying that this signature was not the right person, or this LPA has not been correctly done, the witness should be the one to say, nope, I was there. This is the donor's wishes. The attorneys are genuine and correct. So although in the guidance to the government forms, it will say you can technically use anybody, pick someone from a bus stop or something. My recommendation would be actually to go with a witness who you do know and who, if called upon at your time of need, could provide a statement to the Office of the Public Guardian, who are the organization separate to the court that specifically deal with lasting powers of attorney. They can satisfy any investigation that this is a validly completed, because you're going to be doing it yourself. So the next section you'll find within the forms after you've done donor, attorney, witnesses is the certificate provider. The certificate provider can also be a witness as long as they've known you for longer than 2 years. And the certificate provider will be confirming your mental capacity. So that's an important section of the form. Some people prefer to use a doctor if you can get hold of them. I know in practice, people have really struggled to get an actual GP or doctor who knows them to confirm that capacity. And if it is an issue, because, for example, somebody has potentially lost capacity. So just because if you have a diagnosis of dementia or some memory loss, it doesn't mean, okay, that's it, you can never do a lasting power of attorney. There can be legal steps followed to prepare a lasting power of attorney with a potential opportunity to capture the individual's wishes while their memory is good. So in that situation, a doctor certificate or a doctor's being certificate provider is helpful and necessary. But in the majority of cases, you're fit and well and you're doing this at a young and good age where you don't have any known illnesses, then anybody technically can be the certificate provider, including a lawyer as well. So then you've completed all the sections of the form. You send this off to the Office of the Public Guardian with a registration fee of £82, and that applies for the processing administration procedure for it to be registered by them. Whether you're sending it online or you're sending it as a hard copy, they'll still need that £82 fee. There are some cases where you're able to complete a remission of fee form, and that means either that the full fee of £82 is waived because you are on some certain income benefits. So it could be housing benefit, council tax benefit, income-based employment allowances. So there's a long list on the website where you will be able to identify, am I in receipt of a valid benefit? That means I don't have to pay. So that means you're exempt, and you'll specify that on the form. If, on the other hand, it's actually just a low income situation, so the threshold for lasting powers of attorney is £12,000. If you are, and you have to evidence this as well. So with the benefits or with the low income application, you might get 50% of that fee off, and you'll need to submit something to demonstrate that your income is below £12,000, which is the current amount, and something to evidence the benefit.
Thank you,
So
Yasmin.
I'll pass you back to Sister Alia for this part.
Thank you very much. So we would like to now introduce you to Solace's new service, which is the new lasting powers of attorney service. We want to, Solace is here to ensure that should you find yourself in difficulty as a revert woman, that you are fully informed, educated, and supported. This is why Solace exists. And as you can see, this service and everything that Yasmin has gone through and explained in great detail, mashallah, very much ties in with our remit as a charity. So we want to ensure that every single revert woman has her choices protected by law in regards to her health, welfare, property, and finances. So it's very, very important that you take this as seriously, if not more, as you do your will. And I'm sure you agree with that, Yasmin, that it's just as important as the creation of our wills, right?
Yeah, I think because of the cases I've experienced where if somebody doesn't have a will, there are certain legal things we can do afterwards to support the family, such as a deed of variation or sorting out what distribution happens, even if they didn't get around to doing a will, right? In the circumstances where the person didn't get around to doing the lasting power of attorney, it's like there isn't any other solution than the court route. And going to court, like we've already shared, comes with that expense, time, but also a huge amount of risk that the wrong person is appointed, somebody you really wouldn't have gone for, but they're the ones that take over because you're vulnerable, you can't decide, and the court looks at the case for like 5-10 minutes and goes with what they suggest. And we as a legal practitioner cannot undo that because it's all abiding by the law. And so yeah, my service of ALHQ Law and More, is totally support the community in any way I can to get, my dream and ambition is everyone has this in place, and we are very powerful in our lifetime. Our Muslim communities pick their choice of person for their health, welfare, property, and financial affairs, and that is solid, if that makes sense. So that's for your whole lifetime. It's valid for the lifetime. You can make changes if you want to, but the idea is to pick someone you trust for your lifetime for this for these important decisions, because bearing in mind this person can also change your will too, or
Yeah.
write the will for you. So it's quite impactful if done properly.
Thank you. Thank you. So through this service, you can grant someone someone you trust, obviously, and I think Yasmin highlighted that a number of times during the webinar. Someone you absolutely trust, to hand over them the authority to act on your behalf when you cannot do so yourself. This is what this service is all about. And whether that could be managing your financial affairs, making crucial healthcare decisions, or handling legal matters. A legal power of attorney empowers you to have a reliable and trustworthy representative rather than a stranger making major decisions about you and your life. So this is what this is all about. Now, why use this service? Well, registering while you can, and you can see that on the slides there, that the word can is highlighted. Registering while you can means that if for any reason, and our whole life is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we don't know what has been decreed for us. If for any reason you suffer from long-term illness or any disease or condition of the mind which restricts or impacts your mental ability in the future, then you can have peace of mind that you have appointed a trusted family member or friend who understands your faith to make faith-based, because that's what this is all about, really, isn't it? Faith-based decisions on your behalf. So how does it work? So after the webinar ends, please go to the Solace UK website, solaceuk.org/LPA, solaceuk.org/LPA, and you can use the buttons and apply for either a health and welfare LPA or property and financial affairs, LPA, or even both. And I think one of the case studies highlighted that, how important it is actually to have both in place. Once you submit the application form, you will be redirected to the questionnaire to complete. Can you just briefly speak about, just very, very briefly, Yasmin, what we will be completing in that questionnaire?
Yes, sister. This questionnaire will take you directly through the content that you would have needed to populate if you're doing the government forms. So instead of needing to look at these forms, instead you'll just focus on who am I, my full details, full name, full address, full date of birth, who are my attorneys, their full names, including middle names, dates of birth, full addresses. Who do I want to be the witnesses as well, if possible, to think of them and give their full name, address, and details. And then it will ask you decisions about what should be in there in terms of for the health and welfare. Do you want these attorneys to have the decision in their hands about life-sustaining treatment? Our recommendation will be to say yes. Better to be in the hands of your loved ones than external organizations. Similarly, for financial and property affairs, it will ask you the questions there that will enable us as a company to complete these forms for you in a professionally, legally valid way, because we populate the content of the preferences by taking the answers from your question.
Thank you. Thank you. So after completing the questionnaire, you will receive an acknowledgement within 24 hours. And then you can then make the payment for the discounted rate of £95, which is exclusively for applications via Solace UK. Your application is, let me just go to the next slide. Your application is reviewed and you are sent the following within 7 working days: a fully completed lasting power of attorney, including all relevant legal terms and conditions for health and welfare matters and/or property and financial affairs, a unique user-friendly signing and registration instructions drafted by an in-house legal team. Now, Yasmin, you mentioned that obviously a person can go ahead, go to the gov.uk website and complete this on their own. They have that option available to them. Can you explain why, from your experience, it is important to do so via a lawyer?
Yes, one of the things that regularly come up when we are doing our practitioner talks with the Office of the Public Guardian is forms being rejected. So year on year, there are studies just saying that these forms are not completed correctly, or they haven't been signed correctly, or the dates have not been included, and it means that it's rejected. So bearing in mind, when you submit your application for the lasting power of attorney, it's not that it comes back from the Office of the Public Guardian within any number of days or weeks. Sadly, due to the backlog from COVID, and even before that, it's similar to a court organization. It's a public sector organization, and they are struggling to catch up on this. It can take about 12 to 16 weeks to get an acknowledgement, confirmation back that, okay, we've got your LPA with us. Then, if there's any queries or errors on that, they will just reject it outright, and you will need to reapply. So you'd lose your £82 registration fee if you had to pay that and start over again. And it can be some very minor things that cause people to get their LPAs rejected, but it can also be a lost opportunity in terms of they're not filling in the section which says preferences. And that's the most important part, to put in the specific legal terms and conditions that's going to make this document the best it can be. Because here's your opportunity. So our legal service will go through the latest terms and conditions that you can include in there. The ones that will include, for example, digital assets or things you might not think of if you're doing online banking. Some banks catch you out because you haven't actually technically specified property to include digital property as one example, for example. And there's a multitude of these things that keep cropping up that we see as practitioners, reasons for LPAs being rejected when done by someone without any legal knowledge or understanding of how the Office of the Public Guardian works. I think it was something like 130,000. So it's not small numbers. And we just wanted to have a service which is as efficient and pain-free as possible to get you through that process of registration, legal validity, and that's where our digital pack comes in. It's a unique document that is accessible from wherever you are. If you need extra support, you're able to reach out to us and we can support you through that. But the main point is that when you go for the digital pack, you'll have the peace of mind it has been all completed correctly, and you just sign and send off. So making it as easy as possible.
Yeah. And I just wanted to share actually, a friend of mine had a neighbor who became incapacitated, and they actually had gone to the gov.uk website and completed the LPA. And
Okay.
then when it came to the point where they needed it, it wasn't valid because they hadn't
Yeah.
completed the form properly. So
It does happen, yeah.
it was,
It's too
yeah,
late then.
yeah, absolutely devastating. And they thought that they actually did have it. But just due to a number of small errors, it was void. And therefore, that the person that was appointed had no legal right to make any decisions. And this, and you know, we've had discussions, Yasmin. This happens quite a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah. This is the worrying thing, is that sometimes you'll say, if you're preparing another legal service, I always do like a client checklist with everyone. Have you got your will in place? Have you got your lasting powers of attorney? Have you thought about X, Y, and Z? You know, as much as we can, early planning to be prepared, because we're living in a non-Muslim country and we have to be aware until it's if it's too late, it's too late. So these kind of issues are quite common, and you may not even realize literally until the time comes that it's not valid, because the banks can change their rules. And so you're completing it as a layperson, just following the basic guidance, and that does not include any of the changes that happen. So we are constantly updating our digital packs to reflect the changes in the law. So at the time you get it and get it registered, that's all valid and good for you to use. And we make sure that it is done properly with a check as well. So when you've got it all back and we know that it's done, we can do a review of that to make sure it is actually valid and you're not having this false sense of security that if you're doing it yourself, you might think, yep, I've done all the steps that they said. And then, yep, like you notice it's not correct when it's too late, because that's when you're needing the document, and that's basically too late to check it. So this process of doing it early, doing it with some guidance, just the peace of mind that you want from the document, basically, you're going to get.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. So this service is in partnership with a faith-inspired legal practice, yeah, which Yasmin, you're a partner of. It's convenient. Um, as Yasmin has covered, she runs a very, very thorough service. So she wants to ensure that you don't find yourself believing that you have a valid LPA, and then when it comes to it, you actually don't. So it's a very comprehensive service. It's simplified, but you know, Yasmin ensures that it is thorough and you have exactly what you need should anything happen to you in the future. Yasmin, there's a user-friendly digital pack which provides step-by-step guidance, ensuring error-free form completion, which you've covered, signing, witnessing, certifying. For property and financial LPA, this service is available to revert women with assets in England and Wales. And for the health and welfare LPA, this service is available to revert women living in England and Wales. Now, I'm sure that there are loads of questions. We actually have gone over, so we will take a number of questions, but what we will do is if we are unable to cover all of the questions that come through, because we're recording this webinar, we will take the questions to Yasmin after the webinar, and then we will post them on the Solace UK LPA page on our website. So if your questions are not answered during this Q&A segment, inshallah, we will be able to answer your questions via the website thereafter. So Yasmin, we're going to, inshallah, take some questions. So let me have a look at the group chat. Right, so the first question, are LPAs valid abroad if something happens whilst you're there?
Yeah, so this is a really good one, an important thing to bear in mind, because I actually do talks and webinars to universities where the students, for example, are going on a travel placement or something like that, and they've actually at that point, maybe for the first time, got lots of money in their bank account or something because they've saved up, they're studying, and they kind of need those funds. If you go abroad and something happens to you, you become ill, or you become unable to return. So it's kind of like temporary, needing someone to activate your lasting power of attorney for property and financial matters, which you've done and you've validated for England and Wales. Even if you haven't lost mental capacity from abroad, if you have got a valid and registered lasting power of attorney in place, say you've picked mom or dad or brother or sister, they can release funds to you or access your accounts, pay your bills on your behalf as the attorney, because technically, although you're not in a coma, you're kind of locked down and stuck abroad or something like that. So yes, it is effective. If you're thinking about doing a lasting power of attorney because you've got assets in another country, you will have to have a valid lasting power of attorney for that particular country. So that's important to bear in mind, that it will only cover you for bank accounts and assets in England and Wales, and you'll need another power of attorney for that particular country's laws.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Next question. If I don't have anyone to be my legal power of attorney, can Solace, for example, a charity or an organization, play this role?
It should be an individual rather than an organization. And it should ideally be someone that you know and trust. So if you don't have anyone at all, I guess it's important, even like you do with your will and you think of a guardian, that you try to initiate that conversational relationship with someone. So I wouldn't know specifically if Solace do that, but other organizations may offer some kind of supportive service. But just bear in mind not to go with the generic organization name, but rather an individual. It has to be a name, a date of birth, and a person with an address.
Thank you. Can I ask, what age do you have to be to apply for this? The sister presumes that it's 18.
Yeah, for England and Wales, any adult over the age of 18 can apply.
Okay. This isn't a question, but one of the attendees has said, have checked the Gov website. It says only for England and Wales.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's, yeah, so we cover England and Wales as well, because it's slightly different in the other jurisdictions, and our digital packs only cover England and Wales as well.
Okay. What happens if your LPA passes away or becomes unavailable for some reason? That's a very important question.
Yes, so if you select an attorney and you haven't picked a replacement attorney, then that will mean that you should apply for a new lasting power of attorney if you've still got capacity yourself. So your attorney's gone, you didn't think of a replacement at the time of application, then you'll need to do a new lasting power of attorney because it's ineffective. So we always recommend in the questionnaire as well, it will pop up to pick attorneys, and you can pick up to 4 or more, but we recommend 4, and then pick replacement attorneys as well. So you get to choose who's a replacement, who's an attorney. If you've only got one person that you can pick, that's fine. But as you're making the document, to make the best of it, try to pick a replacement as well to cover that scenario.
Thank you. Does this protect underage children of single mothers in case of vulnerability?
In a roundabout way, because if you're a vulnerable single mother, something happens to you, there's a real high risk that for safeguarding purposes, other organizations will need to come involved for the children's sakes or their interests. So if you pick an attorney, they will be the person like that you pick in a guardian for a will, but this is in your lifetime. That attorney will then be responsible for looking after your children if you specify it. So it needs to be included in, what we include in the terms and conditions. So if it's not clear and you leave a kind of gap there, there is a risk that children safeguarding laws will take priority. But if you've included it as a preference, then there's possibility it can be captured as a wish or instruction because you've got the young children that you want looked after.
Thank you. Do you have to pay £82 and £95 to go through, to go through the route via Solace?
I believe the way we've set it up is if you want to use the Solace application procedure, you're essentially paying for all of the forms to be completed in a legally valid way, all the preference to be included, and then you get the digital pack to support you with the signing and registration as well. So the £95 fee is for that pack, and then £82 is the registration you would have to pay regardless whether you went to the government website, whether you went for our digital pack service, or say, for example, if you wanted to use your local in-person solicitor or something like that, they might offer this service, but you'll find that every service provider will have a different fee for completion of the forms. And then the registration fee is always a separate one in addition to whatever the form completion fee is.
And normally via another solicitor, the fee is a lot more than £95, right?
Yeah, when I was working in practice, so prior to setting up ALHQ Law and more, I've had a 10-year career in the legal industry, and it can range anywhere from 300 right up to £500 per document. And so we felt that that was quite a barrier to just everyday people that wanted their wishes fulfilled, which is why we came up with the digital pack to be a bit more reasonable, but you still get the quality of all of the legal preferences included in there.
Thank you. Thank you. Just a couple more questions. Should we recommend to our adult children to put this in place, even if they're young adults?
So our recommendation is yes, just because of the way the world is, and as Muslim believers, how we should be living is that, tomorrow could be our last, tonight could be our last night. We just don't know. Any time we are at the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from illness and disease, but have we actioned this verse of being guardians for our loved ones? We think we have because, of course, if we see someone vulnerable, we will look after them, we will care for them. But when it comes to the law, without the lasting power of attorney, you're kind of leaving yourself in that realm of risk. So the moment you can, our recommendation is to do it. And then bearing in mind, as the person grows older, has a spouse, goes on to have children, even say, for example, myself, my children are very young, so I may select attorneys who are my siblings or my parents even, right? But at some point, I would hope, inshallah, that my children would become adult enough that I would update my lasting power of attorney and they become my attorneys. And if I live to that point that I can do that, that's fine. But I haven't left myself exposed that should something happen tomorrow or the next day, I have still picked someone who's my Muslim, trusted person that's going to fulfill everything in all of those decisions.
Thank you. Okay, last few questions. Is it a legal requirement to have an LPA? I'm not quite sure I understand this question. Can it automatically be the closest family member?
So there's no automaticness, I guess. If you hear about next of kin, it doesn't really mean anything in law. Unless you legally appoint an attorney, there's no automatic anything when it comes to banking and health decisions anyway, if that makes
Thank you.
sense. So if I've answered that correctly
Yeah.
or got the question, yeah.
Yeah. Does the LPA need to be British?
I guess what that might mean is, does the person need to be British citizen? So we do actually lasting powers of attorney for international clients who are domiciled abroad, but they have assets in England and Wales. So that would be a property and financial affairs for England and Wales. Because you've got assets here, you would only need a health and welfare one if you're living here and you're going to be using the NHS or you're going to be seeking medical treatment in England and Wales. So that's when the health and welfare LPA is necessary.
Okay. I think the question may be related to the attorney that you're appointing. Does the
Okay.
actual individual have to be British?
There's no requirement that they need to be a particular nationality, but
Okay.
if you bear in mind what their duties are going to be, they need to be someone close by, easily contactable. Picking an attorney abroad is not going to be the best solution for you. It might cause more problems, but
Mm,
it's not illegal to do that, if that makes sense. So you can pick someone abroad, but practically that wouldn't be the first choice.
sure, sure. I think I can
Mm.
see here that the sister said if her spouse isn't British,
Oh,
but
okay.
obviously
Yep. No, spouse is
reside.
fine. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Is there a deadline to apply?
So there's no, well, I guess the medical deadline is to do this before you lose capacity. And because you don't know when you're going to lose capacity, time is of the essence, just because once you've submitted everything signed and validly done to the Office of the Public Guardian, even though that might take 3 or 4, 5, 6 months to come back, because you're in the system, there's still hope for you to get that back. But if you never submit it and you never apply, then yeah, you take the risk it's too late. But there's no official you have to do it by a certain time or date. It's just kind of here it is on the government website, and then there's nothing else really shared about it. So that's their kind of fallback. We made it available to the public, and it's up to you to initiate the action.
Mm. So really, it's if we think about it, not knowing what has been written, it's urgent. It's very, very urgent, and that we take this seriously and we apply as soon as possible. After death, does the L? So I think the question is, does the LPA come to an end upon death, and then the will takes over? The will takes its
Yep,
place.
exactly. The LPAs at that point, we have to send confirmation that they are cancelled or not needed anymore because the person is deceased with the death certificate. And then at that point, yes, if you have a will, that's when we'll be looking at the will to action, inheritance, and distribution. Yeah.
Lovely. Okay, the last question. What does it cost if you later need to update the LPA?
So that can vary because it's more of a custom tailor-made request depending on what you need to change. If it's a minor change, we do like a partial revocation £100 fee. If it's like the entire document needs to be redone, then we would review that with you as to how much of the content, like a full revocation and a reapplication. So yeah, I guess at the time that you need a change, just have a review on what you need to change and then proceed on that basis. So yeah, it's kind of a big range depending on what you want to change.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so if there are any further questions, then please do email info@solaceuk.org and we will forward those questions to Yasmin. But I strongly encourage everyone to visit the Solace UK website, solaceuk.org/LPA, to apply for the service. Not only are you protecting yourself should qadar Allah, anything happen, but you're actually, by doing it through Solace, you're protecting yourself by ensuring that everything is done with ihsan, thoroughly, so that you actually have a valid LPA. Too many horror stories, as Yasmin has said, where people think they're covered and then at the time when they need it most, they're not. So I encourage everyone to visit the Solace UK website, apply, inshallah, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant all of us the very best of health. May we be enveloped in his protection. And it's very important, obviously, as Muslims, that yes, we have reliance upon Allah, but we also are instructed by our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to tie our camel and then trust in Allah. And this is what we're doing here. So do visit the website solaceuk.org/LPA. I would like to thank Yasmin for her time tonight. I know that you are a big advocate of this and you want to spread it, everywhere you can within the ummah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you for bringing this very, very important service and information to us, because we're just completely unaware, so may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you and place barakah in what you're doing. And I hope that everyone will ensure that they have their wills in place, as well as their legal powers of attorney as well. Any final words from you, Yasmin, before we wrap up, inshallah?
Oh, alhamdulillah, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure to go through all of this, and it will, I believe, be recorded and available to watch later. So, if there's other questions that come up, feel free, sisters, to reach out, because we want to empower the ummah. And Jazakallah khairan for hosting and preparing all of the materials and the service for the sisters. Just feel very blessed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave me this opportunity to share with the community that means the most to me.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. And thank you for reminding me, sisters. Yes, the recording will be up on the website. And if you haven't yet completed your will, we also have a will service at Solace. We also hosted a partner that we offer the service through. So please do go to the solaceuk.org website and ensure that you have both your will sorted as well as your LPA as well. So Jazakumullah khair, Yasmin, for your time, and to everyone who has attended tonight, please do spread the word about this. Share the link with other Revert women, solaceuk.org/LPA. Jazakumullah khair, and have a wonderful evening, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.